My heart skipped a beat when the fading sunlight glinted off something strange at the bottom of our drained family pond. A weathered wooden structure that would uncover not just a forgotten gold rush fortune, but a legendary story that powerful interests had worked tirelessly to erase. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The worst drought in Montana history had forced me to make an impossible decision: completely drain our historic valley pond to repair its failing stone walls. I never imagined that choice would unearth secrets that would reshape the foundation of Western American history and put me in the crosshairs of one of the most influential museum directors in Helena. It all began in the spring of 2023 when rainfall totals across western Montana hit record lows. 4 generations of shepherds had worked this 280-acre farm, and not once in our family's memory had Willow Creek Pond, the spring-fed 2-acre body of water at the heart of our property, ever needed serious repairs. My grandmother always said the stone walls were built so solid they would outlast the mountains themselves. But by late May, cracks had appeared in the century-old structure, threatening catastrophic failure. The wheat fields were already showing signs of stress, stalks bending in the relentless sun. Without reliable water storage, we were looking at losing the entire season's harvest. A financial blow my family might not recover from, especially with the mortgage payment due in October. "Mom, we've got maybe 10 days before the walls become dangerous," my daughter Sarah said one evening as we stood at the pond's edge, just 24 and fresh out of agricultural engineering school. She'd returned to help save the family farm after my husband passed last year. "The emergency reservoir is already low. We need to make a decision about Willow Creek Pond." I nodded grimly. Willow Creek Pond wasn't just water storage. It was the heart of our farm, where my children had learned to swim, where we held family gatherings, where I built my first rowboat with my father 35 years ago. But sentiment wouldn't save our wheat fields or prevent a dangerous wall failure. "Let's call Johnson tomorrow," I said, referring to our neighbor who owned the industrial pumps we'd need. "We'll drain it completely and repair the walls before they collapse." What we discovered the next morning changed those plans entirely. Johnson arrived with his equipment before sunrise, but as he surveyed the pond, his weathered face creased with concern. "Elizabeth, I don't think the walls are the only problem," he said, pointing to the center of the pond where unusual ripples had always indicated the underground spring. "No movement. I think the spring might be shifting." First time I've seen anything like this in 45 years. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Without the spring reliably feeding it, any repairs to Willow Creek Pond might be pointless. We were looking at a devastating choice: attempt expensive repairs on walls with a diminishing water source, or accept the pond's loss and focus on saving what we could of the wheat fields. After a long silence, I made the call: drain it completely. We'll assess the wall structure and the spring situation once we can see everything. Johnson's pumps roared to life, and I watched as pipes began carrying Willow Creek Pond's precious water to our irrigation systems. By midday, the water level had dropped another 5 feet, revealing features of the pond bed I'd never seen before. Old tree stumps from before the pond's creation, the remains of a small dock my mother had built in the 1970s, and peculiarly, what looked like the remnants of a wooden structure near the deepest part. "Mom, what's that?" Sarah asked, pointing to the emerging woodwork. "No idea," I admitted. Been swimming in this pond my whole life and never felt anything like that down there. As the pumps continued their work through the afternoon, more of the structure became visible, what appeared to be the curved top of something large and purposefully built, protruding from decades of sediment. By evening, with the pond nearly empty, save for a small pool in the center, we could see it clearly. The unmistakable shape of what looked like the top of a stagecoach. Its once grand wooden frame now darkened and partially collapsed, but still recognizable. "This was deliberately buried here," Sarah said, carefully making her way across the muddy pond bed to examine it more closely. "And look, there's something metallic inside it." That's when I saw it. The glint that would change everything. As the setting sun broke through the clouds, its rays caught something inside the stagecoach frame, sending a bright reflection back to us. Despite my exhaustion from a day spent rerouting irrigation systems, curiosity propelled me forward. Slipping and sliding through the mud, I joined Sarah at the strange structure. Together, we peered inside what was undoubtedly the remains of a 19th century stagecoach. In the murky water still pooled within, several metal boxes were visible, stacked against each other. "Is that what I think it is?" Sarah's voice trailed off as I reached down into the remaining few inches of water, my fingers closing around something solid and rectangular. As I lifted it from the mud, decades of sediment slid away, revealing a metal box about the size of a thick dictionary. Its once shiny surface had turned dark green with age and corrosion. Despite the deterioration, an insignia was still visible. On its lid, Western Montana Transport Company, arranged in an ornate design. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Mom, this is from the Gold Rush era," Sarah whispered. "These are strong boxes." My hands trembled as I examined the box. It was heavy, sealed tight by time and the elements. A small keyhole suggested it had once been locked, but the mechanism had long since corroded. "Let's get it back to the house," I said, suddenly aware of how exposed we were in the open pond bed, visible from the county road that ran past our property. Something told me we needed to examine this find in private. Back in our kitchen, under the bright overhead lights, the box looked even more remarkable. Clearly manufactured with precision craftsmanship that had survived over 150 years underwater. Using the screwdriver and gentle pressure, I managed to pry the lid open with a sound like breaking glass as the corroded seal gave way. Inside, protected by what appeared to be layers of waxed canvas, were dozens of small leather pouches along with several folded documents. Carefully, I removed one pouch and loosened its drawstring. What poured into my palm made breath catch. Gleaming gold coins, their surfaces remarkably preserved, dating from the 1840s and early 1850s. "Oh my God," Sarah gasped, reading one of the unfolded documents. "Mom, this is a Western Montana Transport Company manifest from 1856. She was right. The letter, dated April 1856, detailed the contents of a shipment heading from Montana Territory mining operations to Helena. Gold coins, raw gold, and banking documents worth a fortune, even in 1856 terms. As we gently examined more contents, our amazement grew. The stagecoach contained multiple strong boxes, each holding gold coins, raw gold nuggets, and documents detailing ownership and transport. "This isn't just some random lost shipment," I said, carefully returning a document to the box. "This looks like a major transport that somehow ended up buried in what would later become our pond." "Remember that book about the lost Montana shipments?" Sarah asked, holding up a gold coin to the light. Several major gold shipments disappeared during the height of the gold rush. Historians have been searching for them for generations. The implications slowly dawned on me. We might have stumbled upon a historically significant find. Possibly one of the legendary lost shipments that had disappeared in the dangerous journey from the Montana Territory to Helena. "We need to call someone," Sarah said. "A historian or museum or something." I nodded, but hesitation gripped me. This land had been in my family since 1902, nearly 50 years after the gold rush ended. The pond itself had been created by my great-grandmother, which meant she either discovered the stagecoach and built the pond over it, or more likely, constructed it herself to hide something she'd found or acquired. Either way, this discovery was somehow connected to my family's history. Tomorrow, I decided. We'll reach out tomorrow. Tonight, let's document everything exactly as we found it. Take photos, make notes. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we involve outsiders. We stayed up until nearly dawn, carefully photographing each item and artifact, making detailed notes about their condition and apparent significance. The more we examined, the more extraordinary our find appeared. Beyond the gold and official papers, there were personal letters written by miners and company officials. One letter in particular caught my attention. Written by a Western Montana transport agent named William Patterson to his supervisor, detailing concerns about road agents, stagecoach robbers, operating along the Montana route, and the decision to divert the scheduled transport via the Northern Trail to avoid interception. The letter was dated just 4 days before the manifest indicated the shipment should have arrived in Helena. According to historical records, it never did. As morning light filtered through our kitchen windows, Sarah and I sat surrounded by our careful documentation, both exhausted and exhilarated. "What do you think it's worth?" she asked quietly. The question carried weight beyond the obvious. Financial implications. If this was indeed one of the lost gold rush shipments, its historical value was immense. Museums would clamor for it. Historians would rewrite accounts of the dangerous gold transport routes. And the monetary value between the historic gold coins, raw gold, and the historic documents themselves could potentially solve our farm's financial problems permanently. "I'm not sure," I answered honestly. "But before we do anything else, I want to check county records. I need to understand how this relates to our family." After a few hours of restless sleep, I drove to the county records office while Sarah stayed behind to monitor the pumping operations, which were still draining the last of the pond water to allow full access to the stagecoach remains. The elderly clerk, Mrs. Donovan, had known my family for decades and greeted me warmly. "Elizabeth Shepherd, twice in 1 year. Don't tell me you're selling off more acreage." She referred to my difficult decision last year to sell 30 acres to keep the farm afloat after my husband's illness had drained our operating funds. "No, nothing like that," I assured her. "I'm researching my family history, specifically my great-grandmother, Margaret Shepherd, and how she acquired our land." Mrs. Donovan's efficiency was legendary in the county. Within minutes, she had pulled the original deed from 1902, showing Margaret Shepherd's purchase of the property from a Thomas Blackwell. "Blackwell," I muttered. "Like Blackwell Creek that feeds our pond." "Oh yes," Mrs. Donovan nodded. The Blackwells were one of the earliest families in the county after the gold rush. Had that land since the 1860s. Thomas was the last of them locally moved to Chicago after selling to your great-grandmother. This new information sent my mind racing. If the Blackwells owned the land during the late gold rush period, then the stagecoach and its contents might have been hidden by them, not my ancestor. But then why would Thomas Blackwell sell land containing such a valuable secret? Do we have any records of who Thomas Blackwell was? His role during the gold rush era? I asked. Mrs. Donovan pursed her lips thoughtfully. "Not here in property records, but you might check with the Historical Society. Daniel Foster over there has been digitizing old newspapers and business records for years." The Historical Society occupied a small Victorian house near the town square. Daniel Foster, a retired librarian with a reputation for encyclopedic knowledge of local lore, welcomed my questions with academic enthusiasm. "Blackwell, you say?" "Oh yes, prominent family. Thomas Blackwell's father was Edward Blackwell, a banker and investor in several mining operations. Financially supported many of the early claims and transport companies. Quite substantial connections to Western Montana transport, according to records." He peered at me over his spectacles. "Any particular reason for your interest?" I prepared a cover story, not ready to reveal our discovery. Just trying to understand the history of our farm better. Found some old woodwork while dealing with the drought situation. Daniel's eyes lit up. Woodwork on the Blackwell property? That's fascinating. Edward Blackwell was known to have connections to Western Montana transport officials. There were even rumors after the gold rush boom ended. Rumors? I prompted when he paused. Well, just local folklore really. During the height of the gold rush, several major shipments disappeared between the mining operations and Helena. Some suspected inside knowledge, given the precision of certain robberies. Edward Blackwell's bank prospered considerably during a time when others struggled. He smiled. Finding anything interesting in your pond, Elizabeth? His direct question caught me off guard. Just some old foundations, I replied carefully. Probably from a structure predating our ownership. Daniel nodded, but something in his expression suggested he suspected there was more to my inquiry. Well, if you do find anything of historical significance, I hope you'll remember our little society here. Too many artifacts end up in private collections, lost to public knowledge. I thanked him and left, my mind whirling with implications. The connection to Western Montana transport through Edward Blackwell provided context for our find. But it also raised new questions. If the Blackwells had hidden a stolen stagecoach shipment on their property, why would Thomas sell the land? And did my great-grandmother know what lay beneath the water when she created Willow Creek Pond? On the drive home, my phone rang, Sarah's number flashing on the screen. Mom! Her voice was tight with tension. You need to get back here now. Someone called about the stagecoach. What? Who? I demanded, accelerating. A woman named Dr. Rebecca Walsh from the Montana Historical Institute in Helena. She wouldn't say how she knew, but she asked specifically about any artifacts recovered from the stagecoach in your pond. She's flying up tomorrow and expects to meet with us. A cold dread settled in my stomach. We hadn't told anyone about our discovery, not a single person. Yet somehow, less than 24 hours later, a museum director from Helena knew exactly what we'd found. Did you tell her we had anything? I asked. No, I played dumb. Said I didn't know what she was talking about. She just laughed and said it would be in everyone's best interest if we cooperated fully. Sarah paused. Mom, she didn't sound like someone making a request. It sounded like a demand. As I pulled into our driveway 20 minutes later, a sleek, black SUV with rental plates was already parked by our front porch. A tall, distinguished-looking woman in an expensive suit stood beside it, surveying our property with the confident air of someone accustomed to owning everything she saw. Dr. Rebecca Walsh had not waited until tomorrow. She was already here, and from her posture alone, I could tell this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. I parked and stepped out, noting the combination of disdain and eagerness in the woman's expression as she assessed me mud-stained jeans, work boots, and the weathered face of a farmer fighting to save her livelihood. Miss Shepherd, she called out, not waiting for introductions. I believe you have something that rightfully belongs in my museum. And just like that, I knew we were in trouble. The treasure from Willow Creek Pond wasn't just a historical curiosity or potential financial windfall. It was already the center of a conflict I didn't yet understand, with players more powerful than I could have imagined. As I approached Dr. Walsh, I became acutely aware of how vulnerable our discovery was. The boxes and their contents were still laid out on our kitchen table, protected by nothing more than the walls of our farmhouse and my determination to understand their significance before deciding their fate. Dr. Walsh, I responded, keeping my voice neutral. You're earlier than expected, and I'm not sure what you're referring to. Her smile never reached her eyes. Miss Shepherd, let's not waste each other's time. I know exactly what you found. In that pond. She gestured toward the now empty basin visible from our driveway. The Patterson shipment has been the subject of historical inquiry for generations. Its sudden emergence on your property is fortuitous. The name sent a jolt through me. Patterson, the same as the Western Montana transport agent who had written the letter about diverting the shipment. Walsh knew precisely what we had found, down to specific details we ourselves had only discovered hours ago. "I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage," I said carefully. "You seem to know a lot about my property and what may or may not be on it. Mind telling me how that's possible?" Walsh's expression hardened slightly. "The Montana Historical Institute has been tracking the potential location of the Patterson shipment for decades. We have resources dedicated to its recovery. When satellite imagery showed you draining a long-established pond during this drought, it aligned with certain historical records in our possession. Satellite imagery. The realization that we had been watched from above. Our desperate attempt to repair our pond walls, interpreted as a treasure hunt, was unsettling." Sarah appeared on the porch, her posture defensive. "Mom, everything okay?" Dr. Walsh was just explaining how she knew about our pond. I called back, not taking my eyes off the woman. "Perhaps we could continue this conversation inside," Walsh suggested smoothly. "What I have to propose will be of considerable benefit to your situation." Her gaze swept meaningfully over our weathered farmhouse, the aging equipment visible in the barn, the stress-yellowed wheat fields beyond. I hesitated, then nodded. This confrontation was inevitable. Better to understand what we were dealing with. In our kitchen, Walsh's eyes immediately locked onto the metal boxes and arranged artifacts on the table. Something flashed across her face, recognition certainly, but also what looked like relief. "The Patterson shipment," she breathed, approaching the table with the reverence of a pilgrim reaching a shrine. "After all this time, may I?" Without waiting for permission, she leaned over the documents, her practiced eye scanning the contents. Extraordinary preservation. The underwater storage. In a sealed container, likely combined with the natural clay in your pond bed, created nearly ideal conditions. "You still haven't explained how you knew it was here," Sarah said, arms crossed. Walsh straightened, composing herself. "Of course. The Montana Historical Institute holds partial records from Western Montana Transport's archives, including coded references to multiple shipments that disappeared during the gold rush. Most were eventually attributed to robberies. But the Patterson shipment, referred to in the records only as the diverted cargo secured beneath Blackwell's northern waters, remained elusive." She reached into her jacket and withdrew a folded document, spreading it on the table beside our finds. It was a map, clearly old but well preserved, showing a county survey from 1860. A small mark labeled WMT was visible in what I recognized as the approximate location of Willow Creek Pond. "We've had researchers attempting to locate this site for generations," Walsh continued. "But without access to private property, and with the creation of a pond sometime in the early 20th century, the trail went cold until the drought and your decision to drain the pond gave us the opportunity we've been waiting for. So, what exactly do you want?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "The Montana Historical Institute would like to acquire the complete Patterson collection for public display and scholarly research," Walsh replied smoothly. "We're prepared to offer fair compensation, of course. Shall we say $175,000? The figure hung in the air between us. It was both substantial enough to ease our immediate financial concerns and insultingly inadequate for what was clearly a historical find of immense significance, not to mention the gold value alone. "And if we're not interested in selling?" Sarah asked, her voice tight. Walsh's smile remained fixed, but her eyes cooled. "I would strongly advise against that course of action, Miss Shepard. These artifacts are of national historical significance. The legal complexities surrounding gold rush artifacts, particularly those associated with Western Montana transport shipments, are considerable. "Are you threatening us?" I asked directly. "Not at all," Walsh replied simply. "Merely informing you of the reality. Our museum has the resources to ensure these artifacts are properly preserved, contextualized, and shared with the academic community. We also have the legal team to address any challenges that might arise regarding ownership claims." The implied threat was clear. "We'll need time to consider your offer," I said finally. Walsh nodded, reaching into her pocket for a business card. "I'm staying at the Pine Ridge Inn. I'll expect your call by noon tomorrow. For everyone's benefit, I hope we can reach an amicable arrangement." After she left, Sarah and I stood in stunned silence, looking at the historical treasure spread across our kitchen table, a treasure that had been hidden for over 150 years, only to be exposed by a drought and claimed by a stranger within hours of its discovery. "Mom, that offer is ridiculous," Sarah finally said. "These gold coins alone have to be worth more than that, not to mention their historical value." "I know," I agreed, "but I'm more concerned about how she found out so quickly, and what kind of legal challenges she might create if we don't cooperate." Sarah's expression hardened with determination. "We need to talk to someone who knows about historical artifacts and their legal status, someone not connected to Walsh or her museum." I nodded, already pulling out my phone. "I'm calling Professor Donaldson at State. He specialized in Montana history before he retired, and he doesn't owe anything to fancy museums in Helena." As I dialed, I glanced out the window toward the empty pond that had been in our family for generations. The exposed stagecoach stood as a stark reminder that sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, and that secrets once revealed take on a life of their own. What had started as a desperate measure to repair our pond walls during a drought had uncovered a gold rush mystery that powerful people had been seeking for generations. And now that discovery had placed our family farm at the center of a conflict between historical truth, institutional power, and the question of who really owns the past. Professor Donaldson agreed to meet us that evening. As I hung up the phone, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The battle for the treasure from Willow Creek Pond had only just begun, and Dr. Rebecca Walsh was not a woman accustomed to losing. Throughout the day, Sarah and I took turns watching the road, half expecting more uninvited visitors. The sky darkened with approaching storm clouds, a cruel irony that rain might finally come now that our pond was empty. I found myself wondering what my great-grandmother Margaret would have done in this situation. Had she known about the treasure when she purchased the land? Had the pond been created specifically to hide the stagecoach, or was that a fortunate coincidence? Our family albums contained a few faded photographs of Margaret, a stern-faced woman in Victorian dress, standing proudly before the newly constructed farmhouse. Local legends painted her as fiercely independent, unusual for her. Time a widow who had purchased and managed the farm alone when most women wouldn't have attempted such an undertaking. Perhaps there was more to her story than family lore had preserved. While Sarah kept watch, I searched through the old trunk in the attic that contained family papers, deeds, letters, photographs, looking for anything that might connect Margaret to the Blackwell family or explain how the stagecoach came to be buried on our land. Among yellowed envelopes and faded postcards, I found a small leather journal, its pages brittle with age. Margaret's diary, spanning the years 1900 to 1905. I carefully turned the delicate pages, scanning entries about weather, crops, and local gossip until a passage from October 1901 caught my eye. Met with T. Blackwell today regarding purchase of the Valley property. He seemed strangely eager to sell, despite the water rights alone being worth twice his asking price. Something in his manner suggests he harbors a secret about the land. Perhaps the rumors about his father's sudden wealth have basis in truth. Another entry, dated June 1902, after the purchase was complete, discovered an unusual depression near the Valley Spring today. The ground there is different disturbed. I believe something lies buried there. We'll investigate further when time permits. And finally, from August 1903, my suspicions confirmed. What I found must remain hidden. For the safety of myself and this farm, I will create a pond over the site. Water covers many secrets, and this one shall remain beneath its surface for as long as necessary. I make no judgment on how these items came to be here, but I understand why it was so eager to be rid of this place. Some fortunes carry too heavy a burden. My hands trembled as I read the words. Margaret had known. She had discovered the stagecoach and deliberately created the pond to hide it once more. But why? What burden did she refer to? And why had she chosen concealment rather than claiming the treasure? The sound of tires on gravel interrupted my thoughts. Through the attic window, I saw Professor Donaldson's weathered pickup truck pulling into our driveway. I carefully returned the diary to the trunk, making a mental note to share this new information with him. Perhaps he could help us understand not just the historical significance of our find, but the moral and legal implications of my great-grandmother's decision to hide it. Professor Nathan Donaldson arrived at our farm just after sunset. His dusty station wagon kicked up clouds as it bounced down our driveway. At 72, he remained sharp-minded and energetic, his white beard and worn leather jacket giving him the appearance of a prospector from another era. He'd been my history professor 20 years earlier, and had maintained a connection to our family through occasional visits and shared interest in local history. "Elizabeth," he greeted me warmly as he climbed out of his car. "Sarah, it's been too long, though I wish the circumstances were less complicated." I'd given him only the barest details over the phone, enough to convey urgency without revealing exactly what we'd found. Now, as we led him into the kitchen where the artifacts remained spread across the table, his historian's composure momentarily faltered. "Good heavens," he whispered, approaching the table slowly. "Is that what I think it is?" "We believe it's part of the lost Patterson shipment," Sarah explained, showing him the documents and coins we'd found hidden in a stagecoach at the bottom of our pond for over 160 years. For nearly an hour, Nathan examined the items with painstaking care, occasionally murmuring to himself or asking questions about their condition and discovery. Finally, he sat back, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "Elizabeth, Sarah, what you've found here is historically priceless," he said gravely. "This isn't just a lost western Montana transport shipment. This appears to be documentation of certain banking interests removing gold reserves during a critical period of Montana's development. The manifest shows this was government gold being transported during the most tumultuous period of the gold rush. This rewrites our understanding of how wealth was distributed during Montana's formative years." "And about the legal status?" Sarah pressed. "Dr. Walsh implied we might not have the right to keep these artifacts." Nathan's expression darkened. "Rebecca Walsh. I know her by reputation. Brilliant curator, ruthless acquisitioner. She's built the Montana Historical Institute's Gold Rush collection through methods that sometimes skirt ethical boundaries." "But legally?" I persisted. Nathan sighed. "It's complicated. Under normal circumstances, artifacts found on private property belong to the property owner. However, gold rush items, particularly western Montana transport shipments, exist in a legal gray area. Some courts have ruled they're state property since they represent Montana's foundational period. So Walsh could have a legal claim," I concluded grimly. "She might attempt one," Nathan acknowledged. "Though the fact that these items were deliberately hidden rather than lost in transit strengthens your position. What troubles me more is, while showing up so quickly, it suggests she had prior knowledge." "She mentioned satellite imagery," Sarah said. Nathan frowned. "Possible, but unlikely to be the whole story. The Montana Historical Institute doesn't have its own satellites. Someone tipped her off, and specifically about this location. That thought had been nagging at me as well. Daniel Foster at the Historical Society seemed particularly interested in what we might find in the pond. Nathan's eyebrows rose. Foster, interesting. He's been approached by major museums for consulting work before. I wouldn't be surprised if he has connections to Walsh. I found something else, I said, and showed him Margaret's diary entries. Nathan read them carefully, his expression growing more serious with each page. This is significant, he said finally. Your great-grandmother clearly knew about the stagecoach and made a deliberate decision to conceal it. Her mention of burdens suggests she understood the complicated history behind these artifacts. So what should we do? I asked. Nathan considered for a moment. First, secure these artifacts properly. I can help you with appropriate storage materials tonight. Second, document everything meticulously, which I see you've already begun. Third, consult a specialist in cultural property law. I have a former student who practices in Missoula. And Walsh? Sarah asked. Her deadline is noon tomorrow. Stall her, Nathan advised. Tell her you're consulting experts about proper preservation methods before making a decision. It's reasonable and buys you time. As Nathan helped us properly wrap and store the artifacts in acid-free materials he'd brought just in case, shared something else that caught my attention. The Montana Historical Institute is currently undergoing a major expansion funded primarily by the Blackwell Foundation. He mentioned casually. Blackwell Foundation, I repeated. Why does that sound familiar? James Blackwell is the CEO of Northwest Ventures, Nathan explained. The conglomerate that's been buying up distressed agricultural properties across western Montana. I nearly dropped the document I was holding. They approached us last year, offered to buy our farm for about half its value after we had financial troubles. They're opportunistic, Nathan nodded. But what's interesting is Blackwell's connection to gold rush history. He's descended from the original Blackwell family that once owned your land, and he has one of the largest private collections of gold rush memorabilia in the country. He's also the Montana Historical Institute's biggest benefactor. So this isn't just about historical preservation, Sarah concluded. There's something personal here. Nathan carefully placed another wrapped document in the storage container. History is always personal to someone, Sarah, especially gold rush history in Montana. These artifacts don't just represent historical facts. They represent narratives, identities, power. Who controls them controls an important piece of how we understand our past. We were interrupted by headlights sweeping across the kitchen window. A patrol car pulled up beside Nathan's station wagon. Sheriff Callahan stepped out, followed by Dr. Walsh. My stomach sank at the sight. Years of friendship with Sheriff Callahan. We'd served together on the school board, supported each other through personal losses, made his arrival alongside Walsh particularly troubling. What kind of situation, Lavra? I asked, deliberately using her first name to remind her of our connection. The sheriff glanced uncomfortably toward Walsh, who remained by the vehicles, her expression smug. Got a complaint about possible mishandling of historical artifacts. Dr. Walsh here claims you've recovered items of significant historical value that might fall under state protection laws. And since when does the Montana Historical Institute dictate law enforcement priorities in Granite County? Sarah asked sharply. Sheriff Callahan winced. It's complicated, Sarah. The State Historical Commission called too. They're concerned about preservation of potentially significant artifacts. I could see Walsh's strategy clearly now. She'd contacted state authorities, presenting herself as a concerned professional while painting us as ignorant farmers who might damage priceless historical items. It was clever, establishing herself as the responsible party while pressuring us through official channels. We've done nothing wrong, Lavra, I said firmly. We found items on our private property. We're consulting with experts about their proper Handling and historical significance. That's exactly my concern, Walsh interjected, approaching the porch uninvited. The improper handling of historically significant artifacts by individuals without proper training or facilities. The Montana Historical Institute simply wants to ensure these items are preserved for posterity. Sheriff Callahan looked increasingly uncomfortable. Elizabeth, nobody's accusing you of wrongdoing, but I do need to verify these items are being properly handled. There are protocols for finds of historical significance. I exchanged glances with Sarah, who gave me a subtle nod. This confrontation was inevitable. Better to manage it on our terms. Come inside, I told the sheriff. You can see everything we found and how we're handling it. Dr. Walsh can wait out here. Miss Shepard, as the museum's representative, Walsh began to protest. Has no legal authority on my property, I finished firmly. This is between Emmy and the sheriff. Lavra hesitated, then nodded. That's fair, Elizabeth. Dr. Walsh, please wait by your vehicle. I'll assess the situation first. Inside, I showed the sheriff the artifacts, now carefully wrapped in the acid-free materials Nathan had provided, stored in our fireproof safe. Professor Donaldson helped us properly preserve everything, I explained. And we've consulted with Melissa Thompson, a cultural property attorney, about the legal aspects. We're not being irresponsible, Lavra. The sheriff examined the documents and artifacts with careful hands. This is definitely significant, Elizabeth. But Walsh made it sound like you were keeping historical treasures in a shoebox. That's her strategy, Sarah said. Paint us as ignorant and herself as the only responsible option. Sheriff Callahan nodded slowly. I know you folks. You wouldn't mishandle something important. She hesitated. But there are state regulations about discoveries of this nature. You should notify the Historical Commission officially. We already have, I replied, showing her copies of the letters Melissa had drafted. We're also inviting proposals from multiple museums and research institutions, including the Smithsonian. We want to ensure these artifacts are handled properly and their story told completely, not controlled by any single institution with its own agenda. Relief washed over the sheriff's face. That's good to hear. Makes my job easier. She glanced toward the window where Walsh was visible pacing by her car. Though I doubt she'd be satisfied. Her satisfaction isn't our concern, Sarah stated firmly. We're following the law and acting responsibly. That should be enough. Sheriff Callahan replaced her hat. It is for me. I'll inform Dr. Walsh that I verified the artifacts are being properly preserved and that you've already contacted the appropriate authorities. She paused at the door. Elizabeth, be careful. Walsh has been making calls all over town. County commissioners, the mayor, even Judge Parker. She's building pressure. Thanks for the warning, Lavra, I said, walking her out. Outside, Walsh's face tightened as the sheriff informed her that no action would be taken. When Sheriff Callahan departed, Walsh remained, her composure cracking slightly. This is a serious mistake, Miss Shepard, she said, voice cold. The artifacts you found require professional conservation that only established institutions like ours can provide. We've contacted several established institutions, I replied calmly, including the Smithsonian. They'll all have equal opportunity to propose how they would handle these artifacts. Walsh's eyes narrowed. You're making a competitive bidding situation out of a critical historical discovery. Not bidding, Sarah corrected. We're requesting comprehensive proposals for conservation, research, and public education. Financial compensation is only one factor we'll consider. A clever approach, Walsh acknowledged with grudging respect, but naive. The process you're suggesting will take months. Meanwhile, these artifacts risk deterioration. And your farm. She glanced meaningfully at our fields, continues facing financial pressures from this devastating drought. I refused to show how deeply her veiled threat struck home. We'll manage our farm. You manage your museum. Walsh straightened her jacket. My offer remains open for another 12 hours. After that, I'm afraid the Montana Historical Institute will need to pursue other avenues to secure these artifacts for proper preservation. After she left, Sarah and I reinforced the locks on our doors and took turns keeping watch through the night. Around 3 a.m., during my shift, I noticed movement near the empty pond. A flashlight beam sweeping across the stagecoach remains. Grabbing my own flashlight and the rifle we kept for predators, I headed out cautiously. 2 men in dark clothing were examining the stagecoach structure, taking photographs. When my flashlight caught them, they froze momentarily, then hurried away toward a vehicle parked on the county road. I couldn't identify them in the darkness, but their presence confirmed. Walsh wasn't above sending people to trespass on our property. By morning, we'd implemented additional security measures, motion sensor lights around the house and barn, wildlife cameras borrowed from our neighbor Johnson, positioned strategically around the property. It felt excessive for a family farm. But the treasure from Willow Creek Pond had changed everything. Professor Donaldson arrived mid-morning with encouraging news. The State Historical Commission is sending a representative tomorrow, he announced. Melissa's letters created quite a stir. They're intrigued by the potential historical significance. And legally, I asked? The Commission's involvement strengthens your position considerably. They'll likely place a temporary protection order on the artifacts while their significance is evaluated. That prevents Walsh or anyone else from making unilateral claims. What about our proposal strategy? Sarah asked. Already generating interest, Nathan confirmed. I've received calls from colleagues at the Smithsonian and the Gold Rush Institute. Word travels fast in academic circles. As we discussed next steps, my phone rang. A local number I didn't recognize. Ms. Shepard, this is Jennifer Olson from the Granite County Chronicle. We're running a story about the significant gold rush discovery on your property. Would you care to comment? My stomach tightened. May I ask how you learned about this? Dr. Rebecca Walsh from the Montana Historical Institute contacted us. She expressed concern about the preservation of historically significant artifacts recovered from your farm pond. Walsh was escalating again, taking the story public to increase pressure. I caught Nathan's eye and put the call on speaker. Miss Olson, I replied carefully. My family has indeed made a discovery of potential historical significance on our property. We're working with historians, legal experts, and the State Historical Commission to ensure proper handling and preservation. Beyond that, I prefer not to comment until experts have evaluated the find. Dr. Walsh claims the artifacts are part of a lost western Montana transport shipment and may qualify as state property. Any response to that assertion? Nathan gestured for me to let him speak. This is Professor Nathan Donaldson, Historian Emeritus from State University. The legal status of these artifacts is considerably more nuanced than Dr. Walsh suggests. The Shepard family is following all appropriate procedures for a discovery of this nature. After ending the call, Nathan grimaced. Walsh is trying to control the narrative. We need to be prepared for more media attention and more pressure. Tactics. Sarah nodded, showing us her phone. The local social media groups are already buzzing with rumors about our discovery, with several comments questioning whether such historically significant items should remain in private hands. The community dynamics concerned me more than Walsh's institutional pressure. Our family had lived in this county for generations, but even longtime neighbors might question our right to control artifacts of national historical significance. Public opinion could shift against us if Walsh successfully framed the narrative. We need to get ahead of this, I decided. Rather than hiding from the attention, we should engage with it strategically. Nathan nodded approvingly. A proactive approach. What do you have in mind? Let's host a proper announcement, Sarah suggested. Invite the Historical Society, local officials, and yes, the media. Show everyone that we're handling this responsibly and transparently. And emphasize that we're seeking the best outcome. For the artifacts and historical record, I added. Not just personal gain. By afternoon, our plans were underway. The State Historical Commission agreed to send their representative a day early to participate in the announcement. Daniel Foster from the Historical Society, whose potential connection to Walsh still concerned me, accepted our invitation with barely concealed excitement. Local officials, eager to associate themselves with a significant discovery, quickly confirmed their attendance. Walsh would be present too. We couldn't exclude her without appearing defensive, but having her surrounded by other stakeholders would limit her ability to control the situation. That evening, as I checked our security measures one final time before dark, a familiar pickup truck approached our driveway. Johnson, our neighbor who had helped drain the pond, stepped out looking troubled. "Elizabeth, thought you should know." Walsh approached me this afternoon, asked all kinds of questions about when we drained the pond, what we saw, then offered me $1,500 for exclusive photos if I had any. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "Told her I work for my neighbors, not against them," Johnson replied firmly. "But she's been talking to others too, offering money for information, suggesting the artifacts could put our county on the map if handled properly." I thanked Johnson for his loyalty, but his warning confirmed what I already suspected. Walsh was working every angle, attempting to isolate us from our community support. The announcement tomorrow would be critical in countering her narrative. That night, Professor Donaldson stayed with us, taking a shift in our impromptu security rotation. Around midnight, during his watch, he woke me urgently. "Elizabeth, someone's at the pond again." Through binoculars, we could see 3 figures with equipment at the Stagecoach. Unlike the previous night's trespassers, these individuals worked methodically, appearing to take measurements and soil samples. "This is beyond trespassing," Nathan said grimly. "This looks like a professional archaeological assessment without permission." "I'm calling the sheriff," I decided. By the time Sheriff Callahan arrived, the trespassers had departed, but not before our wildlife cameras captured clear images of them and their vehicle. The sheriff examined the photos with a frown. "That's Dr. Walsh herself," she identified. "One figure. The others appear to be wearing Montana Historical Institute field gear. This is clear trespassing, Elizabeth." "I'll have a talk with her tonight." "And the pond site?" Nathan asked. "They appeared to be taking samples." "I'll have a deputy guarded until morning," the sheriff promised. This has gone far enough. As Sheriff Callahan departed to confront Walsh, Nathan and I examined the Stagecoach ourselves. The trespassers had been careful not to damage the structure, but had taken soil samples from inside and around it, and appeared to have used ground-penetrating radar or similar equipment. "They're building a case," Nathan explained. "Gathering evidence to argue this is a significant archaeological site that requires professional excavation." "Their professional excavation. Can they do that?" I asked. "Force an archaeological dig on private property?" "Not without legal authorization," Nathan assured me. "But they're preparing for that battle. The samples they took might help them petition for emergency assessment if they can convince authorities the site contains additional significant artifacts at risk." When we returned to the house, Sarah was awake and monitoring our security cameras. "Mom, look at this," she said, pointing to her laptop. The Chronicle already had an online article about our discovery. The headline made my heart sink. "Lost Gold Rush Fortune Found on Local Farm. Experts Express Preservation Concerns." The article quoted Walsh extensively about the potentially catastrophic conservation risks of keeping historically significant artifacts in an uncontrolled environment. It mentioned our farm only as the location of the discovery, with no comment from us despite my brief conversation with the reporter. "They didn't even wait for our statement," Sarah said disgustedly. "Walsh has connections at the paper, Nathan." explained. This is why tomorrow's announcement is so important. It's our chance to reframe the narrative. I walked to the window, looking out at the darkened landscape of our farmland that had been in my family for 4 generations, now at the center of a battle I never anticipated. The drought that had threatened our livelihood had revealed something far more complex than gold coins and old documents. It had exposed the tension between individual rights and collective heritage, between family stewardship and institutional control. As I stood there, I thought again of my great-grandmother Margaret's diary entry. Some fortunes carry too heavy a burden. Was this what she meant? The burden of deciding who truly owned the past, who had the right to tell its story. Sarah joined me at the window. "Mom, what are we going to do?" I squeezed her hand. "What shepherds have always done. Stand our ground, but stand for what's right. These artifacts may have been found on our land, but their story belongs to everyone. We just need to make sure that story is told honestly and completely, not controlled by those with the most power or money." Nathan nodded approvingly from across the room. "That's why history matters, Elizabeth. Not just the facts of what happened, but who gets to interpret those facts, and for what purpose." "Then let's make sure we're on the right side of this history," I said, turning back to the table where tomorrow's announcement plans were spread out. "Let's show everyone that we understand the responsibility that came up from the bottom of that pond." As we finalized the details for the announcement, I felt a strange mix of determination and unease. The treasure from Willow Creek Pond had already changed our lives in ways I couldn't have imagined. But I sensed that the true challenge, and perhaps the true purpose of our discovery, was just beginning to reveal itself. The morning of the announcement arrived with a rare break in the drought-gray clouds gathering on the horizon, promising the possibility of rain. I took it as a good omen, though the irony wasn't lost on me. If rain had come just weeks earlier, we might never have drained the pond, never discovered what lay beneath its waters. As I dressed for the day, I found myself returning to Margaret's diary, reading again her cryptic words about burdens and secrets. What had she known about the Stagecoach and its contents? What moral calculation had led her to conceal rather than claim the treasure? And what would she think of our decision to bring it into the light? I tucked the small leather-bound book into my pocket. Whatever path we chose today, I wanted my great-grandmother's words close by, a reminder that we weren't the first to wrestle with the responsibility of this discovery. Sarah knocked on my bedroom door. "Mom, they're starting to arrive. Dr. Stevens from the Historical Commission is here, and the media vans are setting up at the end of the driveway." I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and prepared to face the day that would determine the fate of the treasure from Willow Creek Pond and perhaps the future of our family farm. By morning, news vans had gathered at our property line. Sheriff Callahan had stationed a deputy to keep them from entering without permission, but their presence turned our farm into an impromptu media circus. Local residents drove by slowly, some stopping to ask questions or offer support, others simply watching the commotion. Dr. Amelia Stevens from the State Historical Commission arrived early, navigating through the media presence with practiced diplomacy. A respected archaeologist with extensive experience in gold rush artifacts, she exuded calm professionalism as she examined our discovery. "The preservation is remarkable," she confirmed after studying the documents and artifacts. "Your prompt action to properly wrap and store these items was appropriate, Ms. Shepard." "And their historical significance?" Sarah asked. Dr. Stevens nodded seriously. "Potentially tremendous, if authentic, and preliminary examination suggests they are. These documents provide unprecedented insight into how Western Montana transport was moving gold during a critical period of Montana's development. The financial instruments and personal correspondence add important context to our understanding of banking operations during the gold rush." Her official assessment provided crucial validation just hours before our public announcement. When Daniel Foster arrived representing the Historical Society, He carried a stack of research materials. "I've been comparing your discovery to our county records," he explained excitedly. "Edward Blackwell's correspondence mentions a secure repository for valuable transit items constructed on his property in April 1856. The timing aligns perfectly with your artifacts." I studied Daniel carefully, still uncertain of his potential connection to Walsh. "Did you mention our pond to anyone after I visited you, Mr. Foster? Perhaps to colleagues at other institutions?" His enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "I may have consulted with some experts about the historical significance of potential finds in that location. Purely academic interest, you understand. Including Dr. Walsh?" Nathan asked directly. Daniel's discomfort confirmed our suspicions. "Rebecca and I occasionally consult on research. I mentioned your inquiries about the Blackwell property, yes. I had no idea she would arrive so quickly or act so aggressively. I couldn't blame him entirely. Academic networks operated on shared information, and he couldn't have anticipated Walsh's tactics. Still, his admission explained how Walsh had known so precisely what we'd found and where. As noon approached, we prepared for the announcement. The media presence had grown to include regional television stations. Local officials arrived in their Sunday best, eager to appear on camera with the historic discovery. Even the county's state representative had made an appearance. Sensing a photo opportunity, Dr. Walsh arrived last, her expression tightly controlled as she surveyed the gathering crowd. Sheriff Callahan moved discreetly to her side, quietly informing her of the trespassing complaint filed against her and her team. Walsh showed no visible reaction, maintaining the composure of a distinguished professional among colleagues. I had prepared remarks with Nathan and Melissa's help, focusing on responsible stewardship and a collaborative approach rather than ownership claims. As I stepped forward to address the assembled crowd and cameras, I felt the weight of the moment. A fourth-generation farmer suddenly thrust into managing a nationally significant historical discovery. "Good afternoon," I began. "My family has farmed this land for over a century. When drought forced us to drain our pond to repair our walls, we had no idea we would uncover a piece of American history that had been hidden for generations. As cameras flashed and reporters recorded, I explained our discovery in straightforward terms, acknowledging its potential historical significance, while emphasizing our commitment to proper preservation and public access. That's why we've invited the State Historical Commission, the Historical Society, and other stakeholders to help determine the best path forward. We've also reached out to multiple reputable institutions, including the Smithsonian, to submit proposals for conservation, research, and public education programs centered on these artifacts." I could see Walsh's face tightening as I continued. "Our goal is not personal profit, but ensuring these artifacts are preserved for future generations and their story told completely and accurately. This discovery doesn't belong to any single person or institution. It belongs to our shared history." Dr. Stevens spoke next, confirming the Historical Commission's preliminary assessment of the artifacts' significance and their recommendation for a temporary protection order, while formal evaluation proceeded. Daniel Foster followed with context about the Blackwell family's gold rush connections, lending local historical perspective. When Walsh finally stepped forward, her remarks were carefully measured, the consummate professional concerned only with preservation and scholarship. The Montana Historical Institute commends the Shepherd family for their discovery and their stated commitment to proper stewardship. We simply urge speed in transferring these delicate artifacts to a properly equipped conservation facility before irreversible deterioration occurs. The implied criticism was subtle but clear. We were still risking the artifacts by keeping them on our farm, regardless of our intentions. I watched reporters noting her comment, some nodding in apparent agreement. When the floor opened for questions, a reporter immediately picked up Walsh's thread. Miss Shepherd, why not immediately transfer these artifacts to an established museum for proper conservation? Aren't you risking damage by keeping them here? Before I could respond, Dr. Stevens intervened. The artifacts are currently stable and properly stored according to conservation protocols. The Shepherd family has consulted experts and implemented appropriate preservation measures. The Commission sees no immediate conservation emergency that would necessitate rushed decisions about their permanent disposition. Her professional assessment effectively countered Walsh's insinuations, shifting the narrative back toward deliberate, collaborative decision-making rather than emergency transfer to her museum. As the formal announcement concluded and attendees began examining the carefully displayed photographs of our discovery, the actual artifacts remained securely stored. I noticed Walsh engaged in intense conversation with Daniel Foster. Their body language suggested disagreement, with Daniel repeatedly shaking his head as Walsh spoke urgently. When Daniel approached me afterward, his expression was troubled. "Miss Shepherd, I feel I should inform you that Dr. Walsh suggested our historical society should formally petition for the artifacts to remain in Granite County rather than being lost to Helena institutions. She implied your process might result in these important local artifacts being removed from the region permanently." "Another pressure tactic," Nathan murmured beside me. "Attempting to create local opposition to your open proposal process." "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That our society supports your collaborative approach," Daniel replied firmly. "I may have inadvertently helped create this situation by mentioning your visit, but I won't be part of manipulating public opinion against you. The Historical Society stands ready to assist however we can." His support was unexpected but welcome. As more attendees offered encouragement, I began to feel the tide of local opinion shifting in our favor. Our transparency and emphasis on collaboration were resonating with the community in ways Walsh's institutional authority could not. The announcement had achieved its purpose, establishing us as responsible stewards rather than opportunistic treasure hunters. But I knew Walsh was far from defeated. Her resources and connections far exceeded ours, and her determination to acquire the Patterson shipment was unmistakable. As the crowd dispersed, Dr. Stevens drew me aside. "Miss Shepherd, the Commission would like to arrange for a formal assessment team to document the Stagecoach in situ before any further decisions are made." "With your permission, of course." "Of course," I agreed readily. "When would this happen?" "As soon as possible, tomorrow morning." The team would include specialists in 19th century transportation, gold rush archaeology, and document preservation. "We'll be ready," I assured her. As the last vehicles departed, leaving our farm, suddenly quiet, Sarah, Nathan, and I gathered in the kitchen to assess the day's events. "We've bought time and shifted the narrative," Nathan said, "but Walsh won't give up easily. The Montana Historical Institute has significant political influence. What's our next move?" Sarah asked. I removed Margaret's diary from my pocket and placed it on the table. "I think we need to understand more about why this shipment was hidden in the first place, and why my great-grandmother chose to keep it that way." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "The historical context could be crucial. If this was indeed government gold being diverted during a politically sensitive period, the implications extend beyond simple theft or concealment." "The museum proposals will take weeks to arrive," Sarah noted. "That gives us time to research the full story and to determine what Margaret would have wanted us to do," I added, touching the worn leather cover of her diary. "She made a moral choice to keep this hidden. Before we decide its fate, I want to understand why." That evening, after Nathan departed with promises to research the Patterson shipment in university archives, Sarah and I read through Margaret's diary more carefully. Beyond the entries I'd found initially, there were additional references to the pond and what lay beneath it. "September 1904, I read aloud. "A banker from Helena visited today. asking pointed questions about the Blackwell property and whether I'd found anything unusual since purchasing it. His interest seemed more than casual. I maintained ignorance, but his questions troubled. And me, some secrets attract dangerous attention, even decades later. She was protecting herself, Sarah observed, and the farm. But from what? I wondered. What made this shipment so controversial that people were still asking questions nearly 50 years later? We continued reading, finding scattered references to Margaret's concerns about powerful interests and her determination to preserve the truth until the right time comes. But nowhere did she explicitly explain what truth she was protecting or how she had discovered the stagecoach's significance. Rain began to fall outside, gentle at first, then strengthening to a steady downpour, the first substantial precipitation in months. I walked to the window, watching water collect in puddles across the farmyard and stream toward the empty pond. "Basin, the pond will start to refill," Sarah noted, joining me. "The stagecoach will be underwater again," I realized. "Just as it was for over a century. Is that a bad thing?" Sarah asked thoughtfully. Water preserved these artifacts better than most museum conditions could have. Maybe that's what Margaret understood. Her observation triggered a memory, something Nathan had mentioned about preservation environments. What if that's why Margaret created the pond? I suggested. Not just to hide the stagecoach, but to preserve it in the most effective way she knew. A natural conservation method, Sarah nodded. The clay-rich soil, the consistent temperature of the spring water, the protection from light and air it created perfect conditions for preservation. This realization shifted my perspective on our great-grandmother's actions. She hadn't just hidden the treasure. She had created an ingenious preservation system using the natural features of the land. Her solution had protected the artifacts far more effectively than 19th century museums could have. What if we followed her example? I suggested, an idea beginning to form. Instead of choosing between institutional removal or private possession, what if we created something new? Something that honors both the artifacts and the context that preserved them. Sarah looked at me curiously. "What are you thinking?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But I think we need to look beyond the conventional options." Margaret did, and her solution lasted for over a century. As the rain continued through the night, water slowly accumulated in the pond basin. By morning, a shallow pool had formed around the stagecoach, beginning the process that would eventually return it to its underwater sanctuary. Dr. Stevens arrived with her assessment team just after dawn. They worked methodically, photographing and documenting the stagecoach structure, taking careful measurements, and collecting minimal samples for analysis. Unlike Walsh's clandestine team, they explained each step and sought permission before any invasive procedures. "The craftsmanship is remarkable," noted Dr. Pearson, the transportation specialist, as he examined the stagecoach frame. "This is a Montana Territory special model, manufactured specifically for gold transport. Only 12 were ever made, and we thought all had been destroyed or lost. The positioning is deliberate," added Dr. Rivera, the archaeologist. "It wasn't simply abandoned here. Someone excavated this depression, positioned the coach, and carefully backfilled around it. This was a planned concealment, not an accident or hasty burial." Their observations confirmed what we had begun to suspect. The stagecoach hadn't simply been lost or abandoned. It had been deliberately hidden by someone with the resources and motivation to undertake a significant engineering project. "Do you have any theories about who might have done this?" I asked. "Or why?" Dr. Stevens exchanged glances with her colleagues. "We have some historical context that might be relevant. The Patterson shipment disappeared during a period of significant political tension. Montana was still a territory, with competing factions vying for economic and political control. Edward Blackwell, who owned this land then, had connections To both transport companies and territorial government, Dr. Rivera added. There were rumors that certain officials were diverting government gold to fund private interests, essentially embezzlement on a territorial scale, so this could have been politically motivated theft, Sarah asked. Or politically motivated protection, Dr. Pearson suggested. Remember, this was a chaotic time. What some would call theft, others might call safeguarding. Without the full documentation, it's difficult to determine the motivations. As if on cue, Nathan's car appeared in our driveway. He hurried toward U.S., carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the excited expression of a historian who had found something significant. Elizabeth, Sarah, he called as he approached. I found references to the Patterson shipment in the university archives. And something else, something that changes everything we thought we knew about this discovery. He opened the portfolio to reveal photocopies of yellowed newspaper articles and handwritten letters. These are from the personal papers of William Patterson, the transport agent mentioned in your documents. They were donated to the university 30 years ago, but never fully cataloged. We gathered around as Nathan spread the papers on a portable table the assessment team had set up. Patterson wasn't just a transport agent. He was secretly working with federal investigators examining corruption in the territorial government. His official correspondence, including what you found, was written for public consumption. But his private letters tell a different story. Nathan pointed to a letter dated just before the shipment disappeared. The governor's faction plans to seize the federal reserves upon arrival. We have confirmed their intention to use these funds to influence the upcoming territorial elections and potentially delay statehood. After consultation with Marshal Davis, I have arranged for the shipment to be secured at an alternate location until federal forces can ensure its legitimate disposition. He was hiding it from corrupt officials, Sarah realized. Exactly, Nathan nodded. This wasn't theft. It was an attempt to protect federal funds from misappropriation. But why wasn't it ever recovered? I asked. Nathan's expression grew somber. Patterson was found dead a week later. Officially ruled an accident, but these letters suggest he suspected he was being followed. Without him, no one knew where the shipment had been hidden. Except possibly Edward Blackwell, Dr. Stevens suggested. If he provided the hiding place. Which explains why his son Thomas was so eager to sell the property decades later. I added, the pieces falling into place. He knew what was hidden here, but couldn't retrieve it without raising suspicions. And my great-grandmother discovered it after purchasing the land, I continued, but recognized its significance and chose to protect it rather than claim it. Dr. Stevens shook her head in amazement. This completely transforms our understanding of the Patterson shipment. It's not just a lost gold shipment, it's evidence of a significant historical conspiracy that could rewrite our understanding of Montana's path to statehood. The assessment team's excitement was palpable as they continued their documentation with renewed purpose. What had begun as a routine evaluation of gold rush artifacts had become an investigation into political intrigue that had shaped Montana's early history. As they worked, Nathan drew me aside. Elizabeth, this new context significantly strengthens your position against Walsh's claims. This wasn't just a commercial shipment, it was federal property being protected from corruption. Its historical significance extends far beyond its monetary value. But it also means we have an even greater responsibility to ensure its story is told accurately, I replied. This isn't just about gold coins and documents. It's about revealing a hidden chapter of Montana's history. Exactly, Nathan agreed. And that's why I don't think any existing institution is the right custodian for this discovery. It requires a new approach altogether. The idea that had been forming since last night suddenly crystallized. What if we created something here? Not just preserving the artifacts, but the entire context, the stagecoach, the pond, the story of how it was hidden and found. Nathan's eyes lit up with understanding. A site-specific historical center. Not removing the artifacts from their context, but making that context part of the historical narrative. The pond preserved these artifacts for over 160 years, I said. What if we honored that connection rather than breaking it? It would be unprecedented, Nathan mused, but potentially revolutionary in how we approach historical preservation. As the assessment team completed their work and the rain continued to fall, slowly returning the stagecoach to its watery sanctuary, I felt a growing sense of purpose. The drought that had threatened our livelihood had revealed not just historical artifacts, but an opportunity to reimagine how we connect with the past. That evening, Sarah, Nathan, and I began sketching a vision for what we started calling the Willow Creek Historical Center. Not a traditional museum that would remove the artifacts from their context, but a place where visitors could experience the full story, from the political intrigue of the 1850s to Margaret's decision to maintain the secret, to our discovery during the drought. We could incorporate the farmhouse too, Sarah suggested excitedly. Show how the land has been continuously worked by the same family through multiple generations. It's not just about what's under the pond, it's about the ongoing relationship between people and place. And the educational opportunities are extraordinary, Nathan added. Students could learn about history, preservation, agriculture, even climate change, all through the lens of this one remarkable story. As our vision expanded, the practical challenges became apparent. Creating such a center would require resources far beyond what our struggling farm could provide. We would need partners, funding, expertise, and a way to counter Walsh's institutional influence. We should approach the Smithsonian first, Nathan suggested. Their focus on American history and commitment to innovative preservation methods aligns perfectly with what we're proposing. And the State Historical Commission, Sarah added. Dr. Stevens seemed genuinely excited about the historical significance of our find. We'll need to move quickly, I cautioned. Walsh won't give up, especially now that the historical significance is even greater than we initially thought. As if summoned by our conversation, headlights appeared in our driveway. Dr. Walsh's sleek car pulled up to our porch, but this time she wasn't alone. An elegant silver-haired man in expensive suit emerged from the passenger side. "Who's that?" Sarah asked, peering through the window. Nathan's expression darkened. "James Blackwell, CEO of Northwest Ventures and current head of the Blackwell family. My great-grandmother's diary mentioned bankers asking questions," I recalled. "The Blackwells have been trying to recover this shipment for generations. And now they've found it," Nathan said grimly, "on land they no longer own." I squared my shoulders, drawing strength from the clarity of purpose I now felt. Let's hear what they have to say. But remember, we're not just protecting artifacts anymore. We're protecting the truth of what happened here 160 years ago. As I moved to open the door, I felt Margaret's diary in my pocket, a tangible connection to the woman who had made her own difficult choice about these artifacts long before I was born. Whatever happened next, I was determined to honor her legacy of stewardship and protection. I opened the door to find Dr. Walsh and James Blackwell standing on our porch, rain glistening on their expensive coats. Behind them, the pond basin continued, filling slowly, water reclaiming what had been exposed by drought. "Miss Shepherd," Walsh began with professional courtesy, "I apologize for the unexpected visit. May one introduce James Blackwell, CEO of Northwest Ventures and chairman of the Blackwell Foundation." Blackwell stepped forward, extending his hand. His resemblance to the faded photographs of Edward Blackwell in the Historical Society archives was striking, the same aristocratic features, the same calculating eyes. "Miss Shepherd, a pleasure to meet you. I've been following the remarkable discovery on your property with great interest." I shook his hand but remained in the doorway. "Mr. Blackwell, this is quite a surprise. I understand your family once owned this land. Indeed, he smiled smoothly. A connection that makes your discovery particularly meaningful to me. Might we come in? What I have to discuss could be beneficial to all parties involved. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Whatever Blackwell wanted, it was better to hear it directly. In our kitchen, Sarah and Nathan stood watching warily as our unexpected visitors entered. I made quick introductions, noticing how Blackwell's gaze immediately went to the fireproof safe where the artifacts were stored. "I'll be direct, Ms. Shepard," Blackwell said once we were seated. "The Blackwell Foundation would like to make you an offer substantially more generous than what the Montana Historical Institute proposed. $3 million for the Patterson shipment artifacts and exclusive rights to the Stagecoach excavation." The figure hung in the air between us. It was enough to save our farm, pay off all our debts, and secure our financial future for years to come. Walsh's expression remained professional, but I could see tension in her posture. This partnership with Blackwell clearly wasn't her first choice. "That's very generous," I replied carefully. "May I ask why the Blackwell Foundation has such specific interest in these artifacts?" Blackwell smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Family heritage, of course. These items represent an important chapter in Montana's development, a chapter intimately connected to my ancestors. The Foundation is committed to preserving such historical treasures." "We're aware of your ancestors' connection to this property," Nathan said, "and to the Patterson shipment, but perhaps not in the way you're suggesting." Blackwell's smile faded slightly. "I'm not sure I follow, Professor." Nathan placed the photocopied letters on the table. "William Patterson's private correspondence paints a very different picture of why this gold shipment was diverted and hidden. It wasn't lost or stolen. It was being protected from corrupt territorial officials who planned to misappropriate federal funds. Officials with whom your ancestor, Edward Blackwell, had close connections," Sarah added. Blackwell glanced at the documents, his expression hardening momentarily before he regained his composure. "Historical records from that period are notoriously unreliable. Patterson had his own agenda, as did many in those chaotic times. Which is precisely why these artifacts deserve thorough, independent historical evaluation," I replied. "Their significance goes beyond gold coins and documents. They represent a hidden chapter of Montana's path to statehood." "All the more reason they should be in the hands of professionals," Walsh interjected. "The Montana Historical Institute, with the Blackwell Foundation's support, can provide the resources necessary for comprehensive research and preservation, or the resources necessary to ensure certain interpretations are emphasized while others are minimized," Nathan countered. Blackwell's eyes narrowed slightly. "You seem to be implying something unethical, Professor Donaldson." "Not at all," Nathan replied calmly, "simply acknowledging that historical interpretation is never neutral. Institutions have priorities, benefactors have interests." I leaned forward. "Mr. Blackwell, Dr. Walsh, we appreciate your offer, but we've decided to pursue a different approach. One that maintains the connection between these artifacts and the place that preserved them for over 160 years. We're creating the Willow Creek Historical Center," Sarah explained. "A site-specific preservation and education facility that keeps the Patterson shipment in its historical context." Welsh's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing genuine surprise. "You can't be serious." "The financial requirements alone would be prohibitive, not to mention the technical expertise needed. Which is why we're partnering with the Smithsonian Institution and the State Historical Commission," I replied, though these partnerships were still just plans rather than confirmed agreements. Dr. Stevens and her team were quite enthusiastic about our approach. Blackwell studied me with new intensity. "Ms. Shepard, I admire your vision. But let's be practical. Your farm is struggling financially. The drought has affected everyone in this region. $3 million would secure your family's future, while ensuring these artifacts receive proper care. Some things are worth More than money, Mr. Blackwell, I replied, thinking of Margaret's diary in my pocket. My great-grandmother discovered these artifacts over a century ago. She could have claimed them then, but she chose to protect them instead to preserve not just the gold, but the truth of what happened. A noble sentiment, Blackwell nodded, but perhaps misguided in today's reality. Historical preservation requires resources that your farm simply doesn't have. Then we'll find those resources, Sarah said firmly, without compromising the integrity of what we found. Blackwell exchanged glances with Walsh, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then he reached into his coat and withdrew a business card, placing it deliberately on the table. My offer remains open for 48 hours, Ms. Shepard. After that, Northwest Ventures will be exploring other options regarding this property and its historical significance. What does that mean? I asked directly. Simply that there are multiple approaches to securing historically significant sites, Blackwell replied, including state historical designation, which could place significant restrictions on how you use your land. Dr. Walsh has considerable influence with the designation committee. The threat was clear. If we didn't sell, they would attempt to control our property through regulatory means. That sounds remarkably like coercion, Mr. Blackwell, Nathan observed, merely outlining the landscape of historical preservation. Law, Blackwell smiled thinly. I thought you'd appreciate the context, Professor. After they departed, we sat in silence for a moment, processing the encounter. They're desperate, Nathan finally said. Blackwell wouldn't have come personally, or offered such a sum if these artifacts weren't extremely important to him. It's personal, I agreed. This isn't just about historical value or museum prestige. The Patterson shipment threatens the Blackwell family narrative somehow. The letters suggest Edward Blackwell was involved in the corruption Patterson was fighting, Sarah noted. Maybe James Blackwell is trying to protect his family legacy, or erase evidence of historical wrongdoing, Nathan added. Either way, their opposition makes our job considerably harder. We need allies and quickly. The rain continued through the night, water rising in the pond basin, gradually enveloping the stagecoach once more. By morning, only the top portion remained visible above the water's surface, a strange mirror of how we had first discovered it. I stood at the pond's edge in the gray dawn light, watching ripples spread across the newly formed surface. There was something poetic about the water's return, as if the land itself was reclaiming its role in this story. A car approached down our driveway, Dr. Stevens returning with her assessment team for a final day of documentation before the stagecoach disappeared completely beneath the rising water. Elizabeth, she greeted me, joining me at the pond's edge. Quite a transformation. Overnight. Nature has its own timeline, I replied, independent of our human concerns. Actually, this gives us a unique opportunity, Dr. Stevens said. We'd like to document how the water naturally preserves the stagecoach. It could provide valuable insights for conservation science. As her team set up specialized equipment to monitor water chemistry and sediment composition, Dr. Stevens shared some news. I've spoken with the Commission about your historical center concept. They're intrigued particularly by the innovative preservation approach. And their official position? I asked. They've agreed to extend the temporary protection order indefinitely while the proposal develops. That prevents anyone, including the Montana Historical Institute, from making claims on the artifacts without due process. It was a small victory, but significant. The protection order would buy us time to develop our vision and secure the partnerships we needed. By midday, Sarah had arranged video conferences with representatives from the Smithsonian's American History Division and the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Both organizations expressed genuine interest in our site-specific approach, recognizing its potential to revolutionize how certain historical artifacts are preserved and interpreted. The underwater preservation angle is particularly compelling, noted Dr. Rodriguez from the Smithsonian. Most conservation efforts focus on removing artifacts from environmental exposure. Your site offers an opportunity to study how certain environments actually enhance preservation. And the continuous occupation of the land by the same family adds another valuable dimension, added Rebecca Wilson from the National Trust. This isn't just about gold rush artifacts, it's about the ongoing relationship between people and place across multiple generations. Their enthusiasm reinforced our conviction that we were pursuing the right path, despite Blackwell and Walsh's opposition. By late afternoon, we had preliminary commitments from both organizations to provide technical assistance and help develop grant proposals for funding. "We're gaining momentum," Nathan observed as we reviewed our progress. "But Blackwell's 48-hour deadline expires tomorrow. We should expect some kind of countermove." We didn't have to wait long. That evening, Sheriff Callahan arrived with formal papers from the State Historical Designation Committee. "I'm sorry about this, Elizabeth," she said uncomfortably. "They're moving to designate the pond and surrounding 5 acres as a protected historical site due to the presence of gold rush artifacts. Once designated, any alteration or development would require committee approval." "Let me guess," I said, scanning the documents. Dr. Rebecca Walsh submitted the emergency petition. Lavra nodded grimly. "Along with James Blackwell as a concerned preservation advocate. The committee has scheduled an emergency hearing for next week." "This is their leverage play," Nathan explained after the sheriff left. "If they control what happens on this land through the designation, they can effectively force your cooperation on their terms." "Can we fight it?" Sarah asked. "Yes, but it would be expensive and time-consuming. Legal battles over historical designations can drag on for years." I walked to the window, looking out at our farmland that my family had worked for generations, now threatened by the very history we had discovered beneath it. "There has to be another way," I said finally. "One that protects both the artifacts and our rights as stewards of this land." That night, unable to sleep, I returned to Margaret's diary, searching for insight from the woman who had faced her own difficult decisions about the Patterson shipment. In a final entry from 1910, I found something I had overlooked before. "I have come to understand that true stewardship is not about possession, but about purpose. The treasures beneath Willow Creek were not meant for any one person's benefit, but as a testament to truth that would someday be revealed when most needed. I may not live to see that day, but I trust that when the waters recede, the right hands will receive what has been preserved." Her words resonated deeply. Margaret hadn't hidden the Stagecoach simply to keep it from others. She had preserved it for a purpose beyond her own lifetime, trusting that it would eventually serve some greater good. As dawn broke, I knew what we needed to do. Not fight Blackwell and Walsh directly, but transform the very nature of the conflict by creating something neither of them had anticipated. I called an emergency meeting with Sarah, Nathan, Dr. Stevens, and representatives from the organizations we'd contacted. Over the next 2 days, as Blackwell's deadline came and went, we developed a comprehensive proposal that would protect both the artifacts and our farm. By the morning of the designation committee hearing, we were ready. The small-town courthouse was packed local residents, media, historians, and preservation advocates. Walsh and Blackwell sat confidently at the front, their attorneys arrayed beside them with binders of supporting documents. When my name was called to testify, I approached the podium with a quiet confidence, born not of arrogance, but of conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I stand before you not in opposition to historical preservation, but in support of a more holistic approach that honors both our past and our future." I outlined our proposal: the creation of the Willow Creek Living History Center, a public-private partnership that would preserve the Patterson shipment artifacts in their original context while continuing the agricultural traditions that had sustained the land for generations. We propose dedicating the pond and surrounding 3 acres as a research and education site, operated in partnership with the Smithsonian Institution and the State Historical Commission. The Stagecoach will remain in its underwater sanctuary, viewable through specially designed observation facilities that don't disturb its natural preservation environment. Murmurs spread through the courthouse as I continued. The remaining farmland will continue as a working operation, demonstrating sustainable agricultural practices that connect visitors to both the historical and contemporary significance of this landscape. I placed Margaret's diary on the podium. My great-grandmother discovered these artifacts over a century ago. She chose to preserve rather than exploit them, creating the pond that protected them until our current drought revealed their presence. We seek to honor her wisdom by similarly protecting these treasures for future generations, not as private possessions, but as shared heritage. Dr. Stevens spoke next, presenting the scientific and historical merit of our approach. Representatives from the Smithsonian and National Trust provided testimony about the innovative preservation methods and educational opportunities our proposal offered. Throughout their presentations, I watched Blackwell and Walsh. Their confident expressions had given way to concern as they realized we weren't simply opposing designation, but proposing an alternative that would be difficult for the committee to reject. When the committee chair invited response from the original petitioners, Walsh approached the podium with practiced poise. While the Shepherd family's proposal is certainly creative, it lacks the institutional infrastructure and financial resources necessary for proper long-term preservation. The Montana Historical Institute stands ready to provide immediate professional conservation for these critically important artifacts. Blackwell followed with his own testimony, emphasizing his family's historical connection to the site and his foundation's commitment to substantial financial support. As the hearing continued, public comment overwhelmingly favored our proposal. Local residents spoke passionately about the importance of maintaining both the historical discovery and the living farm that had preserved it. Farmers from neighboring counties emphasized the value of keeping the land in productive use while sharing its historical significance. After hours of testimony, the committee chair called a recess for deliberation. In the courthouse hallway, Blackwell approached me directly. "Impressive strategy, Miss Shepherd," he acknowledged, "but ultimately practical. The funding requirements for your vision are substantial. My offer still stands. $3 million would secure your future without the uncertainty of grants and partnerships. Some inheritances aren't measured in money, Mr. Blackwell," I replied. My great-grandmother understood that. She protected these artifacts not for personal gain, but because she believed their story deserved to be preserved truthfully. A noble sentiment, he smiled thinly. But sentiment doesn't maintain buildings or pay staff. You're right, I agreed, which is why we've secured initial funding commitments from multiple sources, including a major foundation grant specifically for innovative historical preservation approaches. His smile faltered slightly. Which foundation? The Patterson Truth Project, Nathan interjected, joining us. Established by William Patterson's descendants specifically to support initiatives that reveal the complete story of Montana's territorial period, including the corruption that nearly derailed its path to statehood. It was a calculated risk. The foundation existed, though we had only preliminary discussions with them. But Blackwell's reaction confirmed our suspicions about his true motivations. Patterson's interpretations were biased and self-serving, he said sharply. Historical accuracy requires more balanced perspectives, which is precisely what our center will provide, I replied. Complete access to all documents and artifacts, interpreted through multiple historical lenses. No single narrative controlling the story, including yours, Mr. Blackwell. When the committee reconvened, their decision was unanimous. They approved a modified designation that incorporated our Living History Center concept while providing the necessary protections for the artifacts. Crucially, they rejected the emergency acquisition powers Walsh had sought, instead emphasizing collaborative stewardship between our family preservation institutions and the state. As we left the courthouse, rain began falling again, gentle, nourishing drops that promised renewal after the long drought. I thought about how water had preserved the Patterson shipment for over a century, and how it had revealed it precisely when its story needed to be told. Water began pooling in the pond basin, gradually rising to cover the stagecoach once more. Standing at the pond's edge with Sarah, watching the rain ripple across the surface, I felt a sense of completion. The drought that threatened our livelihood had revealed what had been hidden for generations, and now the natural cycle was restoring the protective cover that had preserved these artifacts for so long. "It's like the land is telling us something," Sarah remarked. "These artifacts survived because they were protected by water and isolation. Their preservation wasn't about climate-controlled museum cases. It was about being hidden away where time moved more slowly." Her observation sparked a realization. The proposals we'd received all assumed permanent removal of the artifacts from our property. But what if there was another approach? One that honored the unique circumstances of their preservation while still making them accessible for research and education. That evening, I called a meeting with our advisory team: Nathan, Dr. Stevens, Daniel Foster, and now representatives from the Smithsonian and National Trust. What if we create something entirely new? I proposed not just choosing between existing institutions, but establishing a new model for historical stewardship. Over coffee and homemade apple pie, a vision emerged: the Willow Creek Living History Center, an on-site facility that would preserve the artifacts in their geographical context while providing researcher access and educational programming. We could build it near the pond, Sarah suggested, enthusiasm growing. Design it to harmonize with the landscape rather than imposing on it. And structure it as a collaboration between multiple institutions, Nathan added, rather than exclusive ownership by any one entity. The Smithsonian could provide conservation expertise, Dr. Stevens noted. State University could coordinate research access. The Historical Society could develop local educational programs. As the concept developed, practical questions emerged about funding, governance, and sustainability. But the core idea, keeping the artifacts connected to the place where they had been concealed and discovered, felt intuitively right. "What about the farm?" Daniel asked practically. "Would you continue agricultural operations alongside a historical center?" "We could integrate them," Sarah suggested. "Agricultural heritage alongside gold rush history, showing how this land has sustained both physical and historical nourishment for generations." The vision expanded to include demonstration fields, growing heirloom wheat varieties from the gold rush era, living history programs about rural life in the 1860s, and research opportunities examining the interconnection between agricultural and political history. By midnight, the concept had evolved from vague idea to pragmatic possibility. The challenge would be securing institutional partners willing to collaborate rather than control, and funding sufficient to create a facility meeting professional conservation standards. "It won't be easy," Dr. Stevens cautioned, "but it's a compelling vision that honors both the artifacts and their context. I think we can make a strong case to potential partners." The following month brought intensive conversations with institutions that had submitted proposals. Some, like the Montana Historical Institute, rejected our collaborative concept outright, insisting on traditional acquisition and removal. Others, including the Smithsonian and State University, expressed cautious interest in the innovative approach. The breakthrough came when Nathan arranged a meeting with Diana Patterson Williams, director of the Patterson Truth Project and great-great-granddaughter of William Patterson. Her deep personal interest in revealing the complete story of her ancestors' role in protecting territorial funds aligned perfectly with our vision. The meeting took place at our farm with Diana arriving on a brilliant autumn morning, thoughtful and engaging in her approach. As we showed her the artifacts, explained our vision, and walked the property, including the now-filled Willow Creek Pond with its hidden secret beneath, her enthusiasm visibly grew. "My ancestor's story has been misrepresented for generations," she explained as we stood beside the pond. "Historical accounts painted him as either a thief who stole the shipment or an incompetent agent who lost it. Neither captures the truth of a man who risked everything to protect public resources from corruption." She turned to me with unexpected intensity. "Ms. Shepard, what you're proposing isn't just about preserving artifacts. It's about preserving truth, complex, nuanced historical truth that doesn't fit neatly into simplified narratives." "That's exactly our intention," I replied. "To create a place where the full story can be told, including the difficult parts about power, corruption, and the choices ordinary people make in extraordinary circumstances." 2 weeks later, the Patterson Truth Project announced a $10 million grant to establish the Willow Creek Living History Center as a collaborative institution devoted to preserving and interpreting the Patterson collection in its historical context. The Smithsonian agreed to provide conservation expertise and occasional exhibition opportunities in Washington. State University committed academic resources for ongoing research. The County Historical Society would develop educational programming for local schools. Most significantly, the center would be built on 3 acres of our property adjacent to Willow Creek Pond, designed to harmonize with the rural landscape while meeting museum-quality conservation standards. The remaining farmland would continue active agricultural production, with portions dedicated to heirloom crops and historical farming demonstrations. Dr. Walsh made one final attempt to intervene, offering a substantially increased acquisition offer directly to me. When I declined, explaining our alternative vision was already moving forward, her professional composure finally cracked. "You're making a serious mistake," she warned. "These artifacts belong in an established institution with proper facilities and qualified personnel, not some rural vanity project." "They belong where they can best tell their story," I replied. "And that story is inseparable from this land and the people who stewarded it." She departed visibly frustrated, but the Montana Historical Institute eventually adjusted to the new reality. 6 months later, they requested research access to the collection, a request we gladly granted as part of our commitment to making the artifacts accessible to serious scholars, regardless of institutional affiliation. The Willow Creek Living History Center broke ground the following spring, its architecture drawing inspiration from both 1860s stagecoach stations and modern conservation facilities. The design incorporated an underwater viewing chamber that allowed visitors to see the stagecoach in its resting place, while the pond's natural water protection remained undisturbed. Sarah took the lead in developing the center's agricultural programs, combining her modern training with historical research to demonstrate how farming practices had evolved over generations, while maintaining essential connections to the land. Her innovation extended beyond historical demonstration. She leveraged the center's educational mission to secure grants for drought-resistant farming techniques, gradually transforming our conventional operation into a model of climate-resilient agriculture. As construction progressed, the story of our discovery and the unique preservation approach attracted national attention. Researchers and museum professionals from across the country visited to observe what some called a revolutionary model for community-based historical stewardship. Several universities developed case studies on our collaborative approach to institutional partnerships. On the center's opening day, 2 years after the drought had first revealed the treasure beneath Willow Creek Pond, visitors from across the country gathered to witness something new in historical preservation, artifacts maintained in their geographical context, interpreted through multiple perspectives, and connected to a living agricultural tradition that continued to evolve. Standing at the podium to deliver opening remarks, I looked out at the assembled crowd, historians and farmers, local families and distant researchers, united by interest in a story that had remained hidden beneath water for over 160 years. History doesn't belong to institutions, I began. It belongs to all of us to study, to question, to learn from. The treasure from Willow Creek Pond isn't just gold and documents. It's a reminder that our past remains present beneath the surface of our daily lives, waiting to be discovered when circumstances align. I gestured toward the pond, glittering in the morning sunlight, its surface calm and untroubled, revealing nothing of the secrets it had guarded for generations. A drought that threatened our livelihood revealed something precious that drought couldn't touch: our connection to history and to each other. The crisis that emptied this pond filled our community with a new sense of purpose and possibility. Diana Patterson-Williams joined me at the podium, along with representatives from our institutional partners. Together, we cut the ribbon, opening the center that none of us could have created alone. As visitors streamed in to view the carefully preserved artifacts now displayed near their original hiding place, I stepped away briefly to stand at the pond's edge. The water had returned completely now, covering the stagecoach beneath its protective blanket once more. From the surface, there was no indication of what lay below, just as there had been no visible sign all those years before the drought revealed it. "It's secret," Sarah joined me, her expression thoughtful as she gazed across the water. "Do you ever wonder if there's more down there, other secrets we haven't found yet?" I considered the question, watching ripples spread across the pond's surface where a bird had landed. "Probably," I acknowledged. "But that's true of any piece of land with history. The past doesn't disappear. It just waits to be rediscovered when the time is right." She nodded, then smiled. Dad would have loved seeing all this. The farm thriving in a new way. History and agriculture supporting each other. He would, I agreed, feeling my late husband's presence in this moment of transformation. He always said crisis and opportunity were two sides of the same coin. As we turned back toward the center, where visitors now engaged with history made tangible and accessible, I reflected on how much had changed since that desperate decision to drain Willow Creek Pond. What had begun as a last-ditch effort to repair our pond walls had evolved into something far more significant, not just the discovery of artifacts, but the creation of a new model for preserving them that honored both their historical importance and their geographical context. Montana Historical Institute had not secured the Patterson collection as Walsh had intended. Instead, the Patterson collection had transformed how historical artifacts could be preserved and shared, not isolated in distant institutions, but maintained within their community and landscape, accessible to all who sought to understand their story. The drought that had threatened everything we valued had ultimately revealed something more precious than we could have imagined, not just historical artifacts, but a new vision of how the past and present could coexist, each enriching the other in an endless cycle of revelation and renewal. As rain clouds gathered on the horizon, promising nourishment for our wheat fields and replenishment for Willow Creek Pond, I felt a profound sense of completion. The treasure revealed by drought would continue telling its story long after we were gone, preserved not just by conservation techniques, but by its connection to this land and the community that had become its steward. In the end, the true value of what we discovered lay not in its monetary worth, but in how it had transformed our understanding of stewardship of land, of history, and of the communities that give both their meaning. The drought had ended. The pond had refilled, but the revelation it brought had only begun to spread its ripples through our lives and beyond. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.